Okay, hello. We are up to Siman Yud Aleph Halacha Yud Sif Yud. Says the Mechaber, Im hoye rochuk me'aknaf mole kesher gudel. If the distance from the edge of the beged is mole kesher gudel, v'nisku mechute hoerev, and then it tears acho nishabo kashir kosher. What does that mean? We discussed that there is a minimum and there's a maximum. Where do you put the knot? Where do you put this hole, and where do you tie the tzitzis? So we say that it's got to be at least a shir meloi kesher gudel, which means from the middle joint of the thumb until the top of the nail. If you take that to the edge of the beged, it cannot be less than that. The hole has to be more than that minimum shir from the middle joint until the top of the thumb. And it cannot be more than 3 gudolim, 3 etzbois, 3 thumb breadths into the beged. That's too far in. So it has to be somewhere in between that. Now what if you do the hole in that place, you do it in the right place, like here for example, this is a Baruch Hashem, my talus is kosher, so you've got the mount is more than that from the corner of the beged. It's more than from the joint until the top of the nail, but it's less than 3 etzbois, than 3 gudolim, which is a bit, somewhere ends somewhere over there. What happens if you put it in that place in the first place, and then the beged tears, or it frays, and then it moves down to less than the minimum share? What happens then? So that's what the Mechaber means. Im hoye rochuk me'aknaf melo kesher gudel, v'nitgu, and then it breaks, mechutze ha'erev, the corner of the beged frays, asher nishabo kashir, kosher, it's kosher. Kiven shehoye bo kashir b'shah shehitl bo hatzitzis, because there was the shear when you put the tzitzis on. The minhag is to do some sort of hem around the hole to secure it, that it shouldn't tear and break and go less than a shear. And so too we do a hem at the bottom of the beged, for the same reason, to secure it. In other words, this requirement of how far in does it have to be, does it apply to the roichav habeged or to the roichav and the orach habeged? What is the roichav, what is the orach? Well, imagine you hold up a nice talus. The orach actually is the bit across the top. When a man is standing up, and this is the bit he wraps around his neck, this is the bit along the horizontal. The roichav is a bit counterintuitive. The roichav is actually from when he stands up down to the floor, the vertical, the lines that go down, the height of the talus is actually called the roichav. Now, so it's a machlokas, which we'll come to in a second. Does it apply only to the roichav, these measurements, or to the both as well? And the Mechaber says v'nir in divreihem that it applies to both, and therefore that's why, and this is what our practice is, that we make sure that the hole is put in the right position from both edges, the roichav and the orach of the beged. It's got to be in the correct place on both sides, lengthwise and breadthwise and widthwise. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'nitku, v'hu adinim nikra, so too if it tears, behanekev al yidei zeh lo nishabo kashir, that it hasn't got a shear, v'afilu nasa zeh tekef acha chulya rishona. Even if you put on the first windings and the first kesher, ima kesher, and afterwards it breaks, not a problem, because l'maisa, when you put the first ring on, it's okay. You put it on in the right place. If it frayed at the edge, and then the measurements, the dimensions of the beged are going to change. And so too, as we said at the end of this sif, if it went smaller on the roichav, not only on the orach, according to the second opinion, which says that it needs to be put in the right place in the roichav and in the orach. Now, b'shah. Why is that? Why is it that if you put it in the right place and it subsequently tears, actually me'ekadin is kosher? Says the Mishnah Berurah in Sif Kotan Nun, B'sha'a ukrok siv va'osu lohem sitzis. The pasuk says va'osu lohem sitzis al kanfei bigdeihem lo hikbida Torah shebeshas asiya you al knaf v'lo achkach. It should be in the right place when? At the time when you make the sitzis, when you put the sitzis onto the beged. Therefore, so long as the sitzis were put in place, in a time when it was kosher. If it subsequently tears, we're not worried about that. If your beged tears and then you want to replace your tzitzis and put new tzitzis on, but by now the dimensions of the beged are wrong because there was some sort of tear and now your hole is much nearer the corner of the beged, then you're going to have a problem. Why? Because the Havyasiyah Chadosha, that's considered a new making of the beged, and posel ad sheyitva mitchila, and that is posel until you stitch it from the beginning. Okay, so you should, if that does happen, so long as when you made your tzitzis, it was done correctly, which invariably it has been. If it subsequently tears, if the hole tears and your tzitzis now goes sort of hanging loose at the bottom, you just need to stitch it up and just thrust it back up, because lemaisa it was made in a kosher way. Pachas mikashir, af b'diavad kosher, even though b'diavad is kosher, mikol mokum tov lasos kain, it's good, says the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkot Nun Aleph, it's good to try and fix it, kadei shelo yavo harom lo masho posel, the people who look at it might say, hey, it's posel, to kula am alav din agmir, because not everyone knows the halachas clearly. Nun beis, yesh omrim shebetoch, now this is going on. This final machlokas, like I said, is these dimensions, these shiurim, is it going just on the rochav or the orach as well? So yesh omrim that it goes, it only goes on the orach, and the rochav does not need the shear. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkot Nun Beis, the Sfir Lahu, the ikar shem knaf shaykh al sofa hatachton, because the ikar knaf that the Torah says v'osu al bigdei kanfeihem is talking about the bottom of the beged shel orach habeged. Of the orach of the beged, lo al rochav habeged, but not on the width of the beged. Rochav habeged korei mashem mulubash ben adam kemosim rosh l'raglov, which I explained is the part of the beged which goes from vertically from the heights, from the head to the feet of the person. The orach habeged is korei mashem misatif bo, which he wraps himself with, which is the horizontal, like I just demonstrated. Derech ha'itefu ba'orach. Ein lo shir hanu lamata diyochel asos afilu pochas mikesha agudel aval lamala megimelet boys possible, but doing it more than gimelet boys, like I explained, would be possible. Okay, that's the end of Sif Yud. Now, Sif Yud Aleph. Interesting halacha. Im hagodel shekorin ulias. If the corner of the beged is frayed, but it is wide. In other words, you've got the corner of the beged, and the material has warped, has frayed at the end. That in halacha is not considered proper material, and therefore, if you put your tzitzis in that part of the beged, that doesn't count because it's not considered part of the beged. So that's what the mechaber means. Im hagodel shekorin ulias. If that piece of material, which is called ulias, shehu rochav, is very wide, lo yatzabu hatzitzis, don't put your tzitzis in that area. V'im hitl by posel, and if you do put it there, it's posel because that's not considered part of the beged. The al kanfe bigdeihem kasiv v'zeh ein nechshav me'al beged, but it's not considered part of the beged. However, it does help in some respects. Aval olahu l'shir melokesha gudel v'larchokas gimel etzbois, but it does help when you determine the minimum and the maximum shiurim, i.e., the shir mole kesha gudel v'larchokas gimel etzbois kimesh haneke b'toch beged. So, according to the mechaber, very interesting. If the whole side of the beged, let's say, has frayed, and that means you have normally shesi and orev, horizontal and vertical threads which make up the material. Let's say all the orev has gone away, all the shesi has gone away, one of the two have gone away, and therefore it's all frayed and it's not considered, it's like this sort of material, it's like the tassels we'll say in a second. You can't put your tzitzis in that material because it's not considered part of the beged. But it does count, says the mechaber, when it comes to the measurements of where to put the hole. So say, for example, all the way down over here it's frayed. So I can't put the hole in that material, but it counts regarding the minimum shear. So if I were to let's say this bit is frayed, but I know that I can't put this I can't put my tzitzis anyway in less than from where the joint to the top of the nail. So if I put it a bit further along, even though that material is not considered the beged, it counts when it comes to the measurement, so long as I'm putting my tzitzis in the beged, which is good, the frayed part does count as beged in terms of measurement of where I put the hole, so long as the hole is put in the beged itself, the beged proper. So that's what the Mechaba means. And let's do the Mishnah Berurah on that. Nun Dalet, Shekor and Ulias, Hainu Mashemanichen Ktsas Chutei Shasi below Erev. It's frayed that there's Shasi below Erev. There's no horizontal thread, there's only the Shasi. Or Basof Orgim, and then you weave it like that. V'yeshe Kasvo Shizel Masha Anu Korin Oso B'Shanenu Kraikas. That's what we call the Kraikas, some sort of hem. Ve'ein Chiluk, or the tassel. Ve'ein Chiluk Beinim HaGodel Hu Ba'orech HaBeged HaBarachman. It doesn't make a difference if it's on the Orach or the Reichav. Hu Rochov. So if that frayed part is very wide, which is more than that minimum amount from the joint to the top of the thumb, because if you do it in a lower amount, then in any event it's going to be possible. Which we've explained, that you can't put the hole too far into the beged, i.e. more than gimelet boys. Now, says the Ramah, V'toiv sheyimdo chir hakesha gudel below hagodel. It's better, however, not to use this material at all, says the Ramah, in terms of the minimum amount. So imagine you've got down the side of the tzitzis, it's all frayed, and therefore, says the Ramah, although the Mechaba says you can't, of course, put your tzitzis in the frayed part, but you can put it in the regular part, the proper beged, and you can even use the frayed part for your minimum maximum shiurim, that you measure the minimum share from the frayed part. Says the Ramah, it's not good to do that, and it's better sheyimdo shir kesha gudel below hagodel, without that frayed part. However, for the maximum amount, you can use that frayed part. So imagine this was frayed. So according to the Ramah, I have to start measuring from the middle joint to the top of the thumb, from the edge of the fray, from the beginning of the good beged, but the gimelet spos measurements, i.e. the maximum measurements, I can't put it further in than that I can begin measuring from the corner of the frayed part, the godil, the gimelet spos. So it turns out, according to the Ramah, you're going to have to put your hole somewhere in between, somewhere in between the two, these two parts. You're measuring from the frayed part in between, where you begin measuring from the beged itself, but not too far in, and that too far in is measured from the edge of the frayed part. And that's what the Ramah says at the end. Nun Zayin, the Mishnah Berurah is explaining that Ramah. If the rochav is therefore 2 or 3 etzbois, you're going to be stuck. What should you do? You cut it off, you trim it. If you've got threads one without the shesi or one without the orev, trim it, cut it off. The svas of the talis, which is called the hem, which hasn't got arugin shesi or orev, it's got tassels. If you have got that problem, the best is to trim it, and then you put the tzitzis on afterwards properly on the knaf.